Hey guys, what's up? It's Finch here, and today I'm doing a video on Landorus-I and Landorus-T in the post-DLC 2 current Tundra metagame. So it's just another one of these Pokemon analysis videos. We're going to go over what Landorus-I can do, what Landorus-T can do. Then we're going to touch on a handful of Lando-I checks encounters and a larger handful of Landorus-T checks encounters. And overall, we're just going to give some good analysis for these Pokemon in a potential metagame. But before that, I just want to say, guys, check out my Twitter account. It's popping. I'm really active there too. I just made it, so be sure to leave a link to that in the description. And finally, I just want to say a huge thank you to my boy Slaney, who's contributed to the channel a ton over the last handful of months. He's an amazingly talented thumbnail creator, and also he's making some YouTube videos of his own, so definitely check him out. But yeah, no, huge shout out to Slaney, my guy. But anyway, I don't think I have any other random announcements and plugs to make, so let's get on into the video. Landorus-I is going to be the first Pokemon we touched on, Landorus Incarnate, the original Landorus form, if you will. Now, it has a couple really interesting abilities. Sandforce is one, and believe it or not, back in the days when Landorus-I came out with it. Sandforce was the only ability it could use, because Sheer Force was a Dream World ability, and therefore it wasn't usable in OU. But people still use Landorus-I with Sandforce. It was super threatening. People used like Choice Scarf sets, then eventually Lure sets with Expert Belt and Yachi Berry with Smackdown for things like Skarmory and Rotom Wash back in Black and White 1. And it was still a super menacing Pokemon. Not necessarily broken, but it was like one of the best 5-10 Pokemon in that metagame, you could say. But then it got Sheer Force in Black and White 2, and it got banned pretty promptly. And it got banned pretty promptly from Gen 6, and it got banned pretty promptly from Gen 7. And that's despite, various attempts at counterplay being added to the metagame. I mean, for example, Latios and Latias in Black White, Tornadus-T with OU in Generation 6, and Generation 7, I mean, you got all these megas like Mega Latias, etc. Sulfurous grasses, things like Rotom Wash, Celesteela, but nothing was able to contain it. It was been broken through and through, and we're going to go into why that might be the case, and why it could be the case here, or why it might still be a very potent Pokemon in metagame, but not too much, by going through all of its sets. So first and foremost, personally, I think that the best sets are going to be 3 attacks plus either like a boosting move or substitute, or just 4 attacks outright, and there are going to be literally 5 sets just going over that. I think every single set is going to be running Life Orb. Earth Power with Sheer Force, just it's a given. It hits really hard. For example, things like Toxtricks are going to get killed in one shot. Most neutral Pokemon that are grounded are going to be loving taking that. But also, I think the thing that really breaks Landorus, or at least makes it as amazing as it is the sheer amount of coverage and versatility it has. It's able to adapt to every single potential check encounter. For example, Focus Blast is going to be able to do a ton of damage to Pokemon like Mandibuzz, Skarmory, Corviknight, even Celesteela. For example, you need like plus special defense and a ton of special defense EVs. Something like Mandibuzz to live 2 of these, which is crazy. And if you're running that much, then something like Rock Slide could easily 2-KO it. I also think a mix set with Rock Slide is going to be really good in this metagame with things like Moltres, Zapdos, potentially even Heavy Duty Boots Articuno, Charizard, Talonflame, Dragonite. You go down the list, all kind of seeing usage. It kills Volcarona in one shot and you outrun it, etc. So I think Rock Slide's pretty helpful coverage, all things considered. And then also, I think the 4th move that complements these 3 the most would be probably Sludge Wave, as it hits things like Special Defensive Tapu Fini. It's the only move that really hits Tapu Bulu on this set, and it absolutely eviscerates it. Hits Fairy types like Special Defensive Clefable, which might be able to stomach 2 Earth Powers after like Leftovers plus Protect, for example. Yeah, and it's also worth noting that Focus Blast has a chance to 2-KO Blissey, which is crazy because the only other choice special attack that can do is the Choice Spike Skyrim. So the fact that you only need Life Orb with Sheer Force, you're not even taking Life Orb recoil, and you could still do that if you're accurate enough and you get the rolls, and that's kind of crazy. Yeah. It can one-shot a Fizzly Defensive Ferrothorn, it can 2-KO, it could kill a Fizzly Defensive Skarmory after Stealth Rocks, and even 2-KO Specially Defensive Skarmory, but yeah. Specially Defensive Celesteela and Corviknight might be some of your better bets, especially because of the ease prediction, but, and as for Corviknight, it has pressure, so you only get 4 Focus Blasts, but still, you gotta be really careful there, all things considered, but yeah, no, I mean, sets like this, the 4 attacker set that we're looking at right here, are just some of the most potent, threatening, potentially unchecked and counterable sets. Things like Latios and Latias can check this, which is cool. And they should also be able to check this and this, which we'll get to in a minute, but they can't really check sets with U-turn or knockoff. And again, this is going back to my point. And I'm going to go through all these sets, don't worry, I promise. But this is going back to my point that what makes Landorus-I so good is not only the sheer strength it has, because it is absolutely unmatched in terms of strength for a non-choice user in this metagame in my eyes, but also couple that with the fact that A, it's pretty fast, and B, it's able to adapt its sets to pick and choose what checks and counters it, which is amazing for every single team. There are no 4 moves that can necessarily cover every single last thing, but For example, if you have a team that you really want to lure Latios or Latias in, then you could run a set with knockoff or U-turn. You know, it doesn't kill them in one shot, but it's going to do enough to where they're not able to check anything else anymore in the game. And that's huge, and it makes cores with Landorus offensively just far too oppressive. And overall, I think Landorus-I is one of the most fun Pokemon. I'm kind of hoping it stays in the tier for a little bit, but I would be so understanding if it doesn't, just because, like, nothing really is a consistent check. Like, I think that's something that could define if something's broken or not largely is going to be, like, is there overlap and counterplay between sets? Like, for example, last generation, Zygarde got banned because the things that were able to check the Substitute plus Coil plus Glare set weren't always able to check, like, the DD plus Dragon moveset, or the Boosting move plus Toxic set, or so on and so forth. And there was no real overlap. There were no universal checks and counters to Zygarde. Or maybe just, like, Tangrowth, and even then it's struggling against Toxic or Z movesets in the long haul. So yeah, you have to be really careful. And Zygarde's Pokemon we might touch on in the future, by the way, but not in this video, unfortunately. But with that said, I still think it's really telling that Landorus is just so versatile, it's able to cover so much, and it's really oppressive to check and counterplay. It's going to completely warp the way we build. We're going to have to run, like, double checks to it on most teams. There are a ton of offensive pressure, and that's something that I don't love. It's kind of like Urshifu on steroids, while fast, like on attack, on, like, damage output plus coverage plus speed. It's basically like a freaking world beater, is what I'm trying to say. See, you get the point. But anyway, let's go through the sets 1v1 now. Rock Polish is able to win against offensive teams. This coverage is probably the best speed move coverage, as I said before. It does miss out on Lati. It does miss out on Tapu Bulu. And also, it's going to struggle to break, like, Assault Vest Tangrowth if we happen to see that. But that aside, I think it's really freaking good. Focus Blast off the modest nature is demolishing things. Earth Power, obviously, very strong as well. You could one-shot things like Pax to kill things like Gastrodon and Slowking if it's not Assault Vest Slowking, that is. And Rock Slide, again, is great for things like Legendary Birds, one-shot Volcarona, etc. So yeah, I think it comes in handy. It's also worth noting that, like, 89, 90, 80 bulk, even with the minus nature, is actually really respectable for a Pokemon with this much offensive, potential and speed. So you got to keep that in mind as well. Anyway, as for the next set, I think a Combine set's also just, like, stall teams that are completely just full to the set. And you run Sludge Wave over Rock Slide here just because at +1, Sludge Wave is going to be doing a ton of damage to the aforementioned birds. And unless you're facing an Articuno, which you're not, they can't one-shot you. Because A, Hidden Power Ice doesn't exist, and B, you're getting a Combine up and all that. So yeah. And this just hits ridiculously hard. It's almost a joke how hard this thing hits. I should show some calcs, but you get the point. Next up, yeah, we have the U-turn set and a knockoff set. I feel like with knockoffs, you can afford to run Psychic, which helps hitting things like Buzzwole, and a lot of neutral things. Like, for example, let's say you're going to knock off into Zapdos or Moltres. And all of a sudden, A, it's like at 70 or 60 some odd percent, but B, on top of that, Psychic with Life Orb is still doing like 45-50 to those Pokemon if they've got max HP and no special defense. Like, it could even 2-KO Moltres outright. So you don't really need Rock Slide for them. All of a sudden, they're no longer checking out, especially because they lost their boots. And on top of that, let's say you face something like a Chansey or a Blissey. Once you knock off the Eviolite or the boots, Focus Blast easily is going to 2-KO them, like, not even close. And also, it's great for things like Celesteal and Corviknight if you don't want to rely on hitting Focus Blast a lot. So yeah, I think this set, the knockoff set's going to be really good. U-turn set, I mean, unless we start seeing overload of, like, Celebi, I probably wouldn't prefer it to the knockoff set personally, but I think it's still really cool because you hit the Latios and Latias, but you also, it's like a hit and run. So, like, you 2-KO them, but also you force them out, and then, like, next time they're not going to want to take that Focus Blast after Stealth Rock because after U-turn damage is, like, crap, they're already low enough. So yeah, as for some other options on Landorus Incarnate, it can definitely run Stealth Rock and Defog as well. You can see a 3-attack plus Stealth Rock set on offensive teams or Defog set on teams that really need utility. Gravity makes it so that Earth Power is just laughably, like, spammable. And last but not least, if you want to get a kill on something like a Gastrodon or maybe a Fizzly Defensive Powder on one hit if they're running Ice Fang or Toxic or whatever it might have you, you could also run Grass Knot, yeah, and also one other move I didn't quite get to mention that I think is some niche Substitute. A sub +3 attack set is going to be really threatening against the right offensive team with right support. So yeah, I definitely would keep that in mind as well. But all things considered, Landorus-I is just ridiculously OP, and it's probably going to be banned, but I mean, I'd love to see it in the tier. It's going to be a really fun Pokemon, and that's what matters. And then next up, we have Landorus-T, which without Z moves is actually kind of like a shadow of its former self offensively, but utility-wise, it might very well be close to as good as ever. I don't think it's going to be like a top 3 Pokemon, but it's undoubtedly going to be OU by usage, and it's going to be really good in OU. I imagine it being somewhere in the A ranks and viability, if you know what I mean by that. And if not, then wait for my next viability ranking video. It'll come out sometime in the near future, and we'll be going over the entire metagame in that video. But with that said, Landorus-T yeah, Scarf is probably going to be the premier set. It's able to compress a lot of rolls. It's a revenge killer. It's a defensive pivot. It's a nice kind of blanket check to a lot of things physically. It has Stone Edge to revenge kill a ton of flying Pokemon that we see pretty often in this current metagame. It's really strong as well. Keep in mind it has 145 base attack, and coupled all of that with the fact that it can defog away hazards is really cool, I'd say. Yeah. Anyway, Scarf is not the only set it could use, believe it or not. It actually has a lot of other sets, but the thing is that a lot of those sets kind of diminish in viability a bit without Z moves. Like, there's still the Stealth Rock Tank set, for example, but that set didn't really see much usage the last 2 generations. In fact, it never really was super mainstay, besides a point in Generation 5, and even now in Generation 5, where Stealth Rock Landorus-T is pretty great on the defensive end. But I think it actually might see a bit of a resurgence this generation just with the Pokemon that we're seeing pop up, like Zygarde, opposing Landorus-T, I mean, things like the Grasses, Kartana, and Tabubulu. So yeah, but without Hidden Power Ice is a bit awkward. I'm going to say that set could kind of use knockoff in the last spot. And I'm thinking Fast might be good because the metagame's speeding up, but you could see a lot more defensively oriented set as well. Either way, as for the move, Stealth Rock, of course, with Earthquake and U-Turn, just, hit them, pivot, get them rocks up, etc. If you want and to be more utility-oriented, you could run Defog over rocks and make it like a bulky Defogger, I guess, as well, especially if you have Wish support. But also, if you don't want to run Knockoff, you don't need Knockoff, you could also run Toxic, which is opposing Landorus-T, the birds like Zapdos, Moltres, etc. And plenty of other Pokemon as well, which is cool. Definitely can come into play. However, I think the more offensive set still have some potential. For example, a Stealth Rock plus Swords Dance set unfortunately doesn't have the power to Z moves like last generation, but a +2 Adamant Stone Edge can still demolish Pokemon like Zapdos, especially defensive Mandibuzz, the list goes on. Moltres obviously dies to one, and Volcarona, Yeah, and you don't even want to be switching your Latios on something like Stone Edge. Despite it not being stabbed, it's going to be still a 2-Kyo, so yeah, it's just really strong. I mean, you see it hits 427 attack, and I don't think it needs really any introduction beyond that. Also, I think a Double Dance set with Soft Sand could be really cool. Earthquake's going to be doing ridiculous damage. You could also use Smackdown over Stone Edge, potentially, or like a Gravity variant. There are a lot of ways to approach this. Of course, bulky Grasses and anything that's faster than it, or anything that's like faster but also still make a hit, so like you can't like beat it no matter what dance you go for, is going to be really good. But overall, it's still going to be an absolute world beater. It's going to be very strong and likely be able to get a kill in most games. So yeah, I think that goes without saying that'll be a viable set. And last but not least, I also think like a Swords Dance Smackdown set could be pretty cool, due to a lot of aforementioned Pokemon like being susceptible to Smackdown and making Earthquake or U-Turn spammable. And what's cool this year, if you face something like a Tangrowth or a Grass type, you could go for Swords Dance, and then +2 U-Turn is going to do a ton in their normal checks and counters too. So I think it goes without saying that that's a pretty cool dynamic there. In addition to that, though, I also think that some other options on it. Again, I mentioned Toxic before. I really think it's like Back/Betrayal and Stealth Rock set, like probably just as good as Knockoff, if not almost as good. And yeah, Superpower can be used in a Scarf set or even Swords Dance sets. It's cool for things like Skarmory, Corviknight, Ferrothorn. It's cool. Explosion can also be used in a Scarf set or just as like an anti-lead set. And last, but certainly not least, there's also the option of Gravity, which makes Earthquakes pretty spammable when not facing a Grass type and grassy terrain. So yeah. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and segue back to Landorus-I. There are a handful of checks to Landorus-I, and when I say handful, I mean it's a small handful, and even then they're not great, that we're going to get into here. One of them being Celesteela. Anyway, sorry, just 1 second, but Celesteela is the first thing that we're going to be discussing. And, like, how do I put this? Okay, sorry for that. I'm just, like, trying to figure out how to put this into words. Focus Blast, like, can and will eventually beat Celesteela. Like, think about it. Turn 1, Landorus is in. They switch Celesteela. It's taking like 45% from Focus Blast. Then it switches out, say, a Grass type like a Tangrowth. Or something like, that doesn't really mind. It could heal up a bit, yeah, leftovers, protect, all that. But like the next time, if it hits 2 Focus Blasts, Celesteela's gone. And that's the thing, like, Landorus's counterplay doesn't have much permanence to it. I think that was the word I was going to look for, the permanence to it. In a sense that, yeah, like, you can heal this up, but you got to be careful. And with the right teammates, it's so hard. Celesteela is probably about as good as it gets, though. I mean, Heavy Slam's going to come close to 2-Kyo, if not 2-Kyo, and definitely do so with Leech Seed. It's not going to love Net Gain knockoff, but still, it's not going to be 2-Kyo'd by Focus Blast, and that's really all you can ask for. So, yeah, I mean, I'd say this is really the only counter. But there are a lot of checks. There are definitely a handful of checks, even beyond these next 5. I think a pivot let Tornadus-T should be able to 2-Kyo with Hurricane, especially after rocks or knockoff. It could knock it off, and it could even live a rock slide, but not to mention it should be able to also live, obviously live Earth Power, but also Focus Blast resist Sludge Wave and Psychic 2-Kyo, but knock off, then you make it so that it's no longer life bar boosted, so you kind of negate the threat. But yeah, I think of that we're going to see a lot of nasty plot offensive tornadoes. We might also see some pivot sets like this, even defog variants. So it's going to be really interesting to see what it could do with heavy duty boots and the durability. I wouldn't be shocked even to see slower sets that just like reap things like that in Lotties. Next up, we have specially defensive Zapdos. Well, this is all you need special defense wise to live 2 Psychic or 2 Sludge Wave, I believe. And then you could run Defense to help live things like, say, Rock Slide if it runs that. But you still have to be careful in the long haul because any chip, then all of a sudden you're easily into a KO range and it's slower, of course. So yeah, but Hurricane should be able to do a lot of damage to it and you can live 2 hits. So it kind of counts as a check, I guess. Next up, probably a bit of a more durable check than Zapdos would be Latias. Again, it has to watch out for knockoff, it has to watch out for U-turn, but I think this kind of defogger set, this kind of pivot might be the main way to use Latias. Mystical Fire helps reduce the damage if it's facing like a Combine set or if it's like spamming Psychic Sludge Wave into you, for example, but also Draco Meteor is going to be able to do like 70-80%, which can go a long way as well. Next up, specially defensive Mandibuzz, and I'm not kidding you when I say you quite literally need 168 special defensive Vs with the plus nature to even take 2 Focus Blasts from Landorus-I, and that's crazy. And even if that's a Commander, if it's knockoffs, Rock Slide, U-turn, then you're like kind of not really in business anyway. So you got to be really careful there. And I think one of the best checks to Landorus on top of this would be accuracy, because if you're missing Focus Blast, or even like accuracy of your prediction, if you're not predicting right, then it could potentially fall short. And that, in some people's eyes, could make it more of a paper threat than an in-battle threat. To which I say, okay, fair enough. So if you're able to keep it in check by outplaying it, then that's great. But that's not really considered concrete counterplay. So that's like why I'm on the fence. But yeah, no, it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out in the actual metagame, but also especially defensive Corviknight, sort of similarly to Mandibuzz, it needs all this and then some special defense to actually tank to, but yeah, no, if you can, that's great, and you have pressure, so you could negate the Focus Blast PP, and then you'll be able to minimize what it can do, so that's cool, but you got to watch out for Combine sets, and also, Brave Bird Recoil can put you into a KO range, so it's definitely a drawback. You might want to consider Drill Peck or even Iron Head, depending on the team, but yeah, no, definitely a viable form of counterplay. Thankfully, Landorus-T has a bit more actual counterplay in the metagame. For one, things like Skarmory and Tangrowth are going to be great against it. Skarmory, if it's running Toxic or Whirlwind or Brave Bird, will be able to do a trick just fine. It could even live potentially 2+2 Stone Edges depending on the spread and the scenario and whatnot. But regardless of that, it's going to be able to tank any one hit with ease and, get a Toxic off, get a Roost off, set spikes up, etc. So, yeah, Skarmory's conventionally done pretty well against Landorus-T besides when it had Z moves like Z-Rock. Next up, there's also going to be Tangrowth, which, okay, you do lose out at Hidden Power Ice, but like Giga Drain plus Leaf Storm is what I've been thinking would be a good replacement. It's cool because Leaf Storm could also break the substitute of Zygarde. You could also compress both into Grass Knot, which is able to break subs from Subcoil Zygarde, plus also do a bit more than Giga Drain to Tangrowth, and then give you option to run something like Stun Spore or Sleep Powder in the 4th slot or whatever you want to do. But yeah, I think that's pretty cool as well. Next up, we also have Slowbro. Slowbro is, it's going to be struggling against Swords Dance variants to, like, how do I put this? Switch in, because if it switches into Swords Dance, then it's got to get a Scald Burn to 1-1v1. But at the same time, it could easily stomach the +2 teleport out into a faster Pokemon, but also, it always wins the 1v1. It could be able to hard counter Stealth Rock sets, and it's the only Swords Dance that you're worried about. Same kind of goes for Celesteela, although you got to hit a lot of Stone Edge against that, and even then, Leech Seed plus Heavy Slam can accumulate it on, and protect Mind Games. So if you don't get the second Swords Dance on a Protect, you actually do lose the 1v1, and it counters every other set. See, I think Celesteela, you could probably move even above Slowbro in terms of like what actually checks and counters it, but the thing that Celesteela hates is being knocked off by utility sets, and then you turned into it, and it's like, fuck, my Celesteela is basically bleeding out health all game, and that's a pain in the ass. And then a bit more of an offensive check and counter due to the lack of Z-Fly would definitely be Tapu Bulu. It also has Choice Band Adamant Grassy Glide, which can just decimate Landorus, taking it out from like probably like 75 plus health. Probably even more to be honest, it's an offensive set, so yeah. But if you're looking for offensive counterplay that also doesn't is happy there's no Z-Fly set, but maybe doesn't rely more on priority, but rather it's just a good all-around threat, I definitely would try Buzzwole. A set like this could go really far in this metagame. Poison Jab for Fairies, Earthquake for Toxapex, Ice Punch for Landorus, and some Dragon types in close combat to spammable stab move. All in all, I think it's going to be really cool how effective something like Buzzwole could be in the metagame if it finds the right combination of moves. So I'm really excited to see that. Yeah. But all in all, those are just kind of the tip of the iceberg. There are also some situational checks like these Pokemon. Corviknight is for one. Again, it has to watch out for a +2 Stone Edge like something like Skarmory, but can shake it. Also has pressure, so yeah, you're gonna force the Swords Dance a bunch of times, and Brave Bird's gonna do a lot. But you gotta watch out for Brave Bird putting you into a KO range, of course. Next up, there's Zapdos. Physically defensive Zapdos actually can live a +2 Stone Edge potentially. Oh crap. I'm gonna have to pause. No, it doesn't seem like it. Alright, sorry about that if you guys heard a noise in the background for a minute there. The phone was going off, but it seems like it's a robocall. The robot's trying to call my house, I guess. No, we've filtered to stop that though. It's probably just some like random spam call. We get way too many of those. Don't get me started on spam call. I could do like a whole video on why I freaking hate spam calls. But anyway, I'm talking about Pokemon and not getting called on the phone. You could run a defensive Zapdos that lives a +2 Stone Edge. Potentially might be a roll if they're Adamant or Jolly, depends on that. But then you're slower than it. A faster one can live any one hit with ease, and Hurricane can to kill it. Again, Stone Edge accuracy, Hurricane accurate, all coming to play here. But also, it does really well against a non-Swords Dance set, so it's important. And then Mandibuzz should be able to live a +2 Stone Edge and just decimate it with Foul Play. And Tornadus-T should be able to live any one Stone Edge and come in on a Swords Dance and decimate it with Foul Play as well. I think that's actually a cool tech that we might be seeing on Tornadus-T sets that are pivoting. Foul Play helps with things like Garchomp, Landorus. Yeah, I actually used it at a little point last generation as well. But also, it helps with some other Pokemon as well. I think Foul Play is kind of like an underrated tech. Oh yeah, it decimates Drill, Kartana. You don't have to like risk like Heat Wave, like not killing Drill, for example, one hit. Yeah, it does well against plenty of other Pokemon as well. So it's gonna be interesting to see if that'll ever gain traction. It's kind of like my Shot in the Dark. Oh, this might be a cool tech. So yeah, that helps there. Physically defensive, Rotom Wash also can do the trick. Just kill it back in one hit and live anything at +2 evens. It's cool. And then again, like Landorus-T of its own without Hidden Power Ice can actually wall Landorus-T. If it's like a Toxic Ground, you can knock it off. You turn into it, like not take much, and that's probably what a lot of the counterplay is gonna be. And I think that's fine. Considering that there are so many other checks and counters as well, and I don't think Landorus-T is really going to centralize this metagame. I mean, I don't even think it really did so last generation as much as people give it credit for, but at the same time, Z moves were really hard to check, so I understood the concerns then, but definitely not the same concerns now. I don't think Landorus-T will be broken by any stretch of the imagination, but I still think it'll be really good, and that's going to be really cool. So it's going to be interesting to see Landorus-I and Landorus-T in this metagame. Definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching, guys. But alright, have a great day. Peace out. Bye.